They say enlightenment is bliss, salvation, awakening, all the beautiful things we long for, speak about, and dream of. But here's what they often leave out. Enlightenment blinds you, breaks you, pulls you out of your comfort zone, and forces you to question your very own existence. It doesn't hand you peace in a pretty box. It rips open your soul and lays bare everything that was never truly you. It dismantles the identity you carry, strips away every pretense, and leaves you standing among the wreckage of what you once called true. This isn't about soothing the edges of who you are already. It's about letting the old self collapse, the image you've carried, the one pieced together from others' expectations and from your own survival tactics. They must be surrendered to the fire. Every false role, every borrowed belief, every identity stitched by the world's hands has to burn away until what God Himself formed remains. It's not self-help. It's a holy undoing. It is the death to the illusion and the birth into the real. It is the cross you lift, the resurrection you rise into, the unshakable truth you were always meant to walk in. Welcome to Faith, Wisdom, and Knowledge, a sacred space where we nourish the soul, renew the mind, and return to the truth of who we are in God. This isn't surface level spirituality. This is the deep end, where healing begins, illusion falls away, and the soul finally feels whole. Here we're not influenced by ego-made ideas, fragile notions built on pride and passing trends. We're anchored in what's eternal, unshakable by time, culture, or opinions. We don't glorify ego. We surrender to divine alignment. And we don't pretend we have all the answers. We walk together, guided by the one who does. To all my returning viewers, thank you for walking this sacred journey with me. And to everyone new here, welcome. You're not here by accident. Before we go any deeper, if you believe in the power of truth and you're here to grow, reflect, and reconnect with God, take a moment to support this ministry. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. It helps keep this channel active and allow these messages to reach more souls searching for real, lasting truth. You can also support by exploring my books, Awakening, Journeying Beyond the Veil, and Faith Over Fear. And if you're ready to deepen your walk, visit the Faith, Wisdom, and Knowledge Hub, a free Notion space filled with spiritual journals and guided resources to support your journey. All links are in the description below. Thank you for being here. Now let's continue. This is not the awakening they highlight on social media. This isn't a carefully curated journey with soft music, silent meditation, and poetic captions about self-love. This is the part no one warns you about, where everything inside you begins to unravel. The scaffolding of your belief, your identity, and your emotional coping mechanism starts to give way. The version of you that once felt certain now feels exposed, unsteady, and raw. It's not graceful, it's disorienting. But this unraveling isn't your destruction. It's the beginning of your becoming. Alignment at first is far from peace. You will be confused, emotionally unbalanced, and fighting an internal war. It's not some polished story most people share. It's the breakdown behind closed doors. It's the night when you are tossing and turning and your thoughts won't stop racing because your soul is crying out for truth and your ego is clawing to survive the collapse. This is the point when you can no longer contain the emotional storm and you can no longer pretend you're okay. The performance fades, the mask falls, and suddenly you're face to face with everything you believed, lived, and guarded just to survive. And though it feels like chaos, this is grace arriving unannounced to set you free. It is the battle of the mind, the war between who you've been and who you've been called to become. The deeper you go, the more you realize how much of your identity was shaped by forces that were never true. The wounds you carry from trauma, the beliefs you absorbed through years of conditioning, the desires and lusts that promised fulfillment but left you empty. Layer by layer, you see how these influences crafted a version of you built for survival, but not the person God created you to be. It hurts to admit that. It's painful to pull back the curtains and realize how many of your beliefs, behaviors, and even dreams were rooted in fear or self-protection. And yet, God uses this unraveling to realign you. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This isn't the soft glow of enlightenment people romanticize. It's fierce. It's life-altering. It makes you question everything you once labeled as normal. You begin to feel like you're crumbling from the inside out. But it's not the real you that's breaking. It's the false you, the constructed you, the disguise. Whoever finds their life will lose it. And whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Matthew 10 verse 39. True awakening isn't about collecting divine wisdom. It's about unlearning the lies that blocked it. Because when the light of God enters a space shaped by ego, fear, and false identity, it doesn't simply soothe, it refines. It confronts everything that is misaligned with truth. It reveals how much of your personality was really just your defense system. It exposes the pain you disguise as strength. It shows you that the version of yourself the world applauded was shaped by rejection, not revelation. And once you see it, there's no going back. You can't unsee the truth. And that truth will either terrify you or transform you. But it will never leave you unchanged. The ego will fight to survive. Make no mistake, the ego won't surrender without a fight. It may go quiet for a while, but it always lurks in the background, whispering familiar lies that give you a false sense of safety, but only keeps you stuck. It convinces you that you're fine where you are. It recalls who hurt you, who failed you, and why you should never let your guard down. The ego disguises self-preservation as wisdom. It whispers that surrender is dangerous, that if you release control, everything will fall apart. It convinces you that trusting God comes with too high of a cost. But the truth is, what you're grasping so tightly is the very thing keeping you bound. The illusion of control isn't keeping you safe, it's keeping you trapped. And the moment you loosen your grip, you discover that fear was guarding the very freedom you've been searching for. The ego will rationalize anything to survive. It will use past experience as proof that your fear is justified. It will stir up old emotions, suppress memories, and deep wounds to keep you reactive and closed. It will even twist the words of faith and truth to justify its resistance. It'll say, I'm protecting my peace, or this is just my truth. But those phrases are often shields, not truth. They are safe excuses for avoiding what God is trying to heal. There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Proverbs 14 verse 12. The ego doesn't want peace, it wants comfort. It doesn't want truth, it wants predictability. It wants to take control of your emotions, your directions, and ultimately your identity. It longs to be the narrator of your life. But God cannot coexist with the ego's rules. He waits for your willing surrender. The surrender of all you thought was you. The stranger, the struggler, and the guarded soul. So that you can return to Him. And surrender feels like death. Not because it ever brought you life. Because that false self was accustomed to routine. To the inner voice shaped by the ego's deception. An imposter identity that was never God. In confusion, you will feel torn as though you're living in two worlds. One ruled by fear pulling your strings to perform. And the other, the gentle hand of the Almighty, guiding you towards freedom and faith. You cannot serve both God and Mammon. Matthew 6 verse 24. And that tearing between God and ego, it feels like grief. It feels like losing something precious until you realize what you thought was valuable was only habit. You're not losing your soul. You're watching the chains fall. You're feeling the walls give way. You're stepping out of the cage you once called safety and breathing the air of freedom for the very first time. And then silence. Not the silence of abandonment, but the silence where ego loses its grip. The stillness where the spirit blooms. where holiness enters not because you earned it, but because you finally made room for it. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Psalms 51 verse 10. And you rise one revelation at a time, one release at a time, until the person God made you to be finally stands in the light. Healing begins with acknowledgement, not with resentment, guilt, or regret, but with finally facing it. As you discover the parts of you that need forgiveness, the Spirit has space to move through you, to gently convict, to comfort, to guide. You're no longer bounded by what happened to you. You're no longer defined by who you had to become to survive it. The guarded version of yourself that wore strength like armor, the one who learned to hide pain behind a practiced smile, the one who shaped their worth around other people's approval, the one who confused endurance with identity. That survival self was necessary once, but it is not the fullness of who you are. And now you are free to lay it down and step into who God always intended you to be. God begins to show you who you truly are. And that's when you realize awareness was never the end goal. It was always the beginning of coming home. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8 verse 32. Awareness is the beginning of healing. When the ego begins to dissolve, what rises in its place isn't emptiness, is awareness. You start to see clearer, sometimes for the very first time in your life. The noise begins to settle, and you begin to notice the subtle ways you've been living in survival mode. You see the defenses you've built, the habits you justified, the stories you repeated to feel safe. It's like waking up in the middle of your own life and realizing how much of it has been a reaction due to a restless spirit. This kind of seeing isn't always easy because we're too busy seeing through the lens of conditioning. And this unclouded version is sacred because from awareness, the healing begins. You start to recognize your triggers, not as failures, but as signals. You become more compassionate with yourself, not because you excuse your patterns, but because you finally understood them. You begin to tell the truth, not just to others, but to yourself. Truth like, I've been afraid of being alone, or I've been controlling because I didn't trust anyone to stay. These honest reflections crack the door open for God to enter. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Psalms 139 verse 23. And when he enters, he doesn't condemn. He begins to restore. The beauty of awareness is that it brings intention. You stop living on autopilot and start choosing your responses. You no longer allow emotions to dictate your identity. You begin to ask, where is this coming from? And is this true? This is where discernment starts to form and spiritual maturity begins to grow. You feel the shift from ego to essence, from striving to surrendering. The purpose of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Proverbs 20 verse 5. And you begin to draw yourself out, one revelation, one release at a time. Healing doesn't begin with a miracle. It begins with honesty. Not with fixing everything, but with finally facing it. As awareness deepens, the Spirit has space to move through you, to gently convict, to comfort, to guide. You're no longer bound by what happened to you. You're no longer defined by who you had to become to survive it. God begins to show you who you really are. And that's when you realize awareness was never the end goal. It was always the beginning of coming home. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The rise of the Spirit. Awareness doesn't just open your eyes, it rearranges your inner world. The moment you begin to see yourself clearly, your choices begin to shift. You no longer react out of habit. You pause, reflect, and respond with purpose. You begin to care less about being seen and more about being aligned. You start to feel the contrast between peace and performance, between striving and surrender. And for the first time, silence doesn't feel empty. It feels full, full of God, full of presence, full of truth waiting to be received. The spirit within you, once buried underneath layers of pain, pride, and protection, starts to rise gently but firmly. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it leads in quiet authority. You begin to discern what is real and what is residue from your past. You no longer need to be led by every emotion because you're being guided by the one who knows the depths of your soul. And your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." Isaiah 30 verse 21. That's the Holy Spirit whispering direction, peace, and reassurance when your old self wants to panic. This rising doesn't happen in a day. It unfolds in layers. Some days you feel completely anchored in God's truth, and other days you may still hear the ego whispered old fears. But now you recognize the voice. You test the spirit. You ask, is this the voice of God or the ghost of who I used to be? You begin to measure everything against the word, not your wounds. You let the spirit interpret your past instead of your pain. And in that process, the spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Romans 8 verses 16. This is the true rise of the spirit, not a burst of emotion, but a slow burning fire that purifies everything false. It doesn't inflate your ego, it silences it. It doesn't make you superior, it makes you surrender. You become less reactive, more rooted, less anxious, more assured. And the closer you walk with God, the more aware you become of what doesn't belong in your spirit anymore. Walk in the spirit and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. Galatians 5 verse 16. And when you walk in step with the spirit, you no longer just survive, you embody the presence of God on earth. Walking in the new identity. When the spirit begins to lead and the truth becomes your foundation, your entire posture in life starts to change. You're no longer rushing to prove yourself to the world. You walk slower, speak softer, and love deeper. Not because you're trying, but because you're transformed. The need for validation begins to fall off of you like old skin. You realize the version of yourself you perform for the world is no longer necessary. You are not reinventing yourself. You are returning to yourself. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone and the new is here. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17. There's a quiet authority that comes with spiritual identity. You stop fighting for a seat at the table because you know you were always called to build your own. You no longer need to over-explain or over-apologize because your value is not up for negotiation. You are rooted in who God said you are. The fruit of the Spirit begins to manifest not just in your thoughts, but in your relationships, your choices, and your language. You begin to carry peace into rooms that once triggered you. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Isaiah 26 verse 3. Walking in your new identity doesn't mean you never face old thoughts. It means you now know how to silence them. You recognize the difference between conviction and condemnation. You begin to walk in humility, not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who has been deeply reshaped by the one who does. The more you walk in truth, the more you attract what aligns with it. And the more you repel what doesn't, God's presence in you becomes the filter for every decision. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. Romans 8 verse 14. And this walk is not without cost. You will leave behind relationships that only knew the old version of you. You'll say no to the things that once gave you a sense of worth. But in surrender, you gain something eternal, unshakable identity. You live no longer for applause, but for alignment. No longer for reaction, but for revelation. And this is how you know the transformation is real. Because you no longer seek to be seen. You seek to be obedient. I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ who lives in me. Galatians 2 verse 20. The cost of staying awake. Awakening is not a one-time experience, it's a lifestyle. And in a world that celebrates distractions, conformity, and emotional reactivity, staying awake comes with a price. Once your spiritual eyes are open, you begin to see through things that used to satisfy you. The entertainment feels hollow. The conversations feel shallow. The environment you used to thrive in now feels too loud, too fast, too disconnected from what your spirit truly craves. And in that contrast, you face the cost of consciousness. Staying awake means living with sensitivity to what others have numbed. It means noticing the manipulations behind media, the fear behind performance, and the emptiness behind cultural definitions of success. You begin to recognize how much of society was built to keep you asleep, to keep you hustling, scrolling, shopping, numbing. And when you don't play along, you stand out. People may call you too intense, too quiet, too deep, too serious. But do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. 1 John 3 verse 13. The path of awakening often leads you away from the crowd and deeper into God. You'll feel the tension of wanting to fit in, but knowing you're outgrowing the illusion. You'll be tempted to dim your light so others won't feel uncomfortable. But staying awake requires courage. It requires choosing alignment over approval and obedience over ease. It reminds you to learn to let go of the need to be understood. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Galatians 1 verse 10. That question becomes a compass when the pressure to conform starts to press against your soul. And yet, what you gain from staying awake far outweighs what you lose. You gain clarity that can't be shaken. You gain peace that isn't circumstantial. You gain a relationship with God that isn't based on emotional highs, but on deep daily trust. You lose the illusion, but you find the truth. You lose the noise, but you find the voice of God. And you realize this awakening, though costly, is the most valuable thing you could ever receive. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, and in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Matthew 13 verse 44. Do you understand the weight of that parable? Jesus is telling us that the kingdom of heaven, true spiritual awakening, union with God, peace beyond this world, is so valuable, so transformative, so eternally rich, that once you truly see it, once you experience even a glimpse of its presence, you'll be willing to give up everything you thought mattered just to dwell in that space. It's not about loss, it's about joyful surrender. The man in the parable didn't walk away sad. He sold everything with joy because he had seen something greater than anything he owned. This is the heart of awakening, when you encounter truth, not just intellectually, but in your spirit. It makes all the illusions of this world feel light, fragile, and temporary. The ego mourns their loss, but the spirit rejoices in the gain. Your status, image, possession, even the need for others' approvals, these things start to lose their grip on you. And what you get in return isn't just a reward. It's the kingdom itself, God's presence, God's peace, God's voice leading your life. But notice something important. The treasure was hidden. It wasn't handed out in public. It wasn't glamorized on a platform. It was buried under layers of distractions, conditioning, performance, and noise. And only those who are searching, those willing to dig, those who dare to leave the crowd and walk the narrow path, they are the ones who find it. That field represents your life, and that treasure is the truth of who you are in God, waiting to be uncovered when you let go of everything false. So the question becomes, are you willing to sell what you've been holding on to in exchange for what cannot be taken from you? Because what Jesus offers isn't just comfort, it's complete transformation. And to receive it fully, you must first recognize its worth. Once you do, there's no hesitation, only joy, surrender, and the quiet knowing that what you found is worth everything it cost. At some point on this journey, you'll realize this path was never about becoming someone new, but remembering who you've always been in God. Enlightenment is not about accumulating more spiritual knowledge. It's about releasing the noise that keeps you from hearing His voice in the first place. It's not about appearing woke or holy, but about becoming deeply honest with yourself. The illusion has fallen. The mask has cracked. And you stared at your own reflection long enough to see both the wounds and the wisdom. Start looking back. The awakening has revealed the real you. Not the egoic version shaped by fear, but the eternal one shaped in the image of God. This is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your return to truth, to simplicity, to God. Now comes the real invitation. Will you stay awake when the world tries to lure you back to sleep? Will you remember what you've seen when distractions come knocking again? Will you trust the still small voice inside you over the loud noise of the crowd? The cost of truth is high, but the cost of abandoning it is even greater. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8, verse 32. But only if you stay with it. Freedom begins when your loyalty to illusion ends. There is a time for inspiration, and there's a time for transformation. This message wasn't sent to entertain you. It was sent to awaken something eternal in you. If something stirred in your spirit, don't let it settle. Speak to God. Write it down. Sit in silence. Make a decision. Return to the place where it all started. The secret place, where your soul and God has no interference between them. That's where the next step will come from. That's where the real work begins. Draw near to God and He will draw near to you. James 4, verse 8. If you come this far, know that you're not walking alone. This ministry was created for people just like you. Souls who are shedding ego, releasing falsehoods, and choosing to walk in truth no matter the cost. If you're ready to continue, explore the free Faith, Wisdom, and Knowledge Hub, a sacred notion space filled with guided journals, reflections, and spiritual tools to walk with you as you walk with God. Dive deeper with my books, Awakening, Journeying Beyond the Veil, and Faith Over Fear. Each one written from the fire of transformation to meet you where you are now. Everything is linked in the descriptions below. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Stay awake, stay honest, stay rooted in truth, because this is not just the end of a message. It's the beginning of your return.